Welcome to Creative Tien channel. Today we have a hand knitting project to make a sleeper, and it's actually very easy to make. We are using bulky yarn. This is what I have. I have 2 balls of this 100 grain yarn. After I make the first one, I have maybe less than half left. So you do need 2 balls of the yarns to make a pair of the socks or the house slippers. And because we are using bulky yarn, so you knit up very quickly. I'm using a set of the size 10 or the 6mm needle. You can use a magic loop method, and this is what I have right now. The construction is actually very simple. I start with the bottom piece. It's the same on the front and at the end. Basically, I start with the cast on one side, increase and knit it flat, and then decrease back to the same stitch as I started. And I'm using the garter stitch, so it creates a very thick and very sturdy fabric. It'll be very warm for the winter. After I knit the bottom piece, I just pick up the stitches along the edges and then knit straight up, and I use 1x1 ribbon. After I knit about 2 inches, I just bind off all the way around, and then I sew up this part. When I sew it up from the back side, it creates an interesting shape here. It depends on where you sew the stitches. It might have a different look from the front. And another interesting thing is that after I sew it up, it creates kind of like a sharp triangle shape in the front. That make it look interesting too. And this is the back side, because this part has more fabric here, so it sticks out, so it looks like a triangle shape. But you can also move it, because it's so flexible, you can mold it into different shape. And this is what I envisioned at the beginning. You have a more curvy shape. So that's the basic construction of the sleeper. This can be a nice Christmas present because it's very easy to knit and it's practical for the cold winter. I will start by casting on 8 stitches. I'm just using regular long tail cast on. It really doesn't matter. And then I will knit 1 row first. And then we can turn over and start our first increase. And to do the increase, I am just going to use a very basic knit front and back. And I always try to avoid the first stitch and the last stitch. So I will do the increase in the second stitch and the second to the last stitch. So it will be knit, knit front and back, knit until the second to the last stitch. So we do the knit front and back here and then knit. You can use other type of increase instead of knitting front and back. And this one, knit front and back. So that's 1 stitch increase. And then knit the last stitch. So that's the 2 stitch increase on this row. And we can turn over and knit another row. Just plain knitting. And then we turn over. We do our increase again the same way as our second row. We will have increase on the second stitch and the second to the last stitch. And the other stitch will be knit because we are doing the garter stitch. Knit front and back, and then knit. So we have 2 more stitches increase, And we will do the same, turn around and knit one more row just for plain knitting. And we just keep repeating that until the width we want. And I want to slow down the increase a little bit. Instead of one knit row in between, I'll have two knit row in between. I already have one. I'm going to start another knit row and then we'll do the increase. Now we turn over and start doing the increase row again, just like before. Knit front and back. This is knit front and back. And last stitch is knit. So two more stitch increase. Now we have 14 stitches. And we will continue doing the same. Do 2 rows of knit stitch and then 1 more row of increase. That should be my last row. And I'm doing this one for medium woman's size. And you can adjust the width. If you have wide feet, you can increase more, so there will be more stitches. For me, I want to do 1 more increase, so the total stitch will be 16 stitches. Now I have 16 stitches on my needle. I can just keep knitting straight without any more increase until near the end. You can see my increasing part takes about 1 3/4 of an inch or almost 2 inches here. So you can have the same at the end of the bottom piece. And everybody has a different size of feet, so you do have to measure your own and see how long you need for the center piece before you start decreasing again. For me, I will knit 8 inches from the beginning, the cast on row, until the 8-inch mark, and then I will start to decrease. Now I need around 8 inches. I'm going to start decreasing, and we will do it the same way as the beginning round, just in reverse. So for decrease stitch, I'm just going to use knit 2 together. That's the easiest way. And again, I will do the decrease on the 2nd and 3rd stitch, knit 2 together, and also 2nd and 3rd stitch before the end stitch, knit 2 together. We will decrease every 3rd rows and then every other rows until we back to a stitch again. Now this is a decreasing row, knit 1, knit 2 together. And then keep knitting until 3 stitches left, and then knit 2 together. And knit 1. And then we'll do 2 rows of knit, and then we'll do the decrease row again. Now after the 2 knitting rows, I'm going to do a decrease row again. Knit 2 together, and again I will do 2 rows of knitting and then 1 row of the same decrease, and after that I will do 1 row of knitting in between decrease rows until I have 8 stitches left. After decreasing it to 8 stitches, I'm going to knit 1 more row of plain knitting, and then we are done with the bottom piece. After we finish the bottom piece, I'm just going to pick up the stitches around the sides, and I'm going to leave these few stitches without binding off. If you want, you can bind off too, but I just try to reduce the numbers of yarn tails I have to weave in later. So I will keep that. And because we are going to knit in the round from now on, I will need a set of double point needle, or you can use the magic loop method. with one circular needle. So this is how I pick up stitches. There's really no right or wrong way to pick up a stitch, but I'm just going in between those two ridges. Like here, I'll pick up my first stitch. And then the next one will be between the two ridges. And I just keep going. And you will see after you pick up, one side has a little ridges, and that will be the inside of the slippers, and the outside will have clean lines. So I will just pick up all the stitches all the way around, and we can rearrange the needles so it's easier for circular knitting. I will have two needles this way and have the rest of the stitches on one needle. But for now, we just focus on picking up stitches first, and we can rearrange it later. And because we are going to do 1 by 1 ribbing, so we should pick up even number of stitches. So there will be pairs of knit and purl. Now I pick up half of the stitches. It's about 34 stitches, including the 4 stitches at the end, because the total is 8 stitches at the end. Now I'm going to use a different needle and pick up another half. So we have 3 needles on the knitting. So another 4 stitches at the end, and then we pick up the sides. That's about 30 stitches. Now I pick up all the stitches. I'm going to distribute the stitches more evenly. I will pick up 8 stitches here, 8 stitches here, and put it on this needle. And it's just a transfer of stitches, so you can do it any way you want. 1, 2, 3. Since this is the location of the live yarn, I will start from here and knit, and in the next round I can distribute the stitches more evenly and place the 8 stitches to the needle in the back. For now, I'm just going to start my ribbing, and I can use the 4th needle I have and start knit 1 stitch, purl 1 stitch, knit 1, purl 1. The only thing you should pay attention is the right side. We do it from the outside, and you can see because the inside has a little bit of ridge. That's because the way we pick up the stitches. But from the outside, you don't see that. So this is the way we knit. So after the first row, you can see I have too many stitches on this needle. Now we complete the first round. I can put some stitches to the extra needle. I will place the 8 stitches here and then continue knitting. Now I have the 8 stitches here. So we will continue knitting, knit, purl, knit, purl. So all the stitches on this needle will be on this needle. Place the yarn in the back, knit, purl. Now the stitches are more evenly distributed, and we just have to keep knitting the 1 by 1 ribbing. We will do around 7 rows, and then we will bind off. And again, you can make it 6 rows or 8 rows, depends on how tight you want your slippers to be. I find the 7 rows works well for me. Now I finished the 7 rows of the 1x1 ribbon. It's very simple. We just bind it off. And you can bind off any way you like, but the simple one will work. I can just bind it off all in knit stitch. You can also bind it off in pattern, knit, purl, knit, purl. This one is bind off in knit, so you can see the chain on the top. And we'll do the same here. Very simple, very basic bind off. Knit 1 stitch, knit 2nd stitch, move the 1st stitch over the 2nd, and we just keep going. Knit the 2nd stitch, okay, we finished binding off. Now it's just like a basket, and I will just weave in the end here, because I like to use a thinner yarn to sew together the front part. And you can decide which side is the front. It's pretty much similar, but one side I didn't bind off. So this side, if you look at the back side, it doesn't have that ridge. The other side has a ridge because we bind it off and then pick it up. So I like to use the one without the ridge as the front. So I will just sew it up like that. I have around 18 bind off stitches from the tip of the shoe to this part. And you can adjust it, make it shorter or longer. I will turn around inside out before I sew it off. And I cut a piece of the thinner yarn and thread it through the yarn needle. Now we are ready to sew. We have the piece inside out. You can see the ridges here. And we have 8 stitches to begin with. So that's 4 of these ridges. So we know this is the center. And just fold it in half. And we'll sew until here. It's about 18 stitches. And you can really decide where to go through the needles, and it will create different look on the right side. First, I will just secure the yarn. I can tie up the end to just like a regular thread. And I like to put the needle through the loop, so it's more secure. Now we are ready to sew. I will pick up the V shape or the 2 yarns, the 2 loops on the top. And then go through the other side. And then go back the next loop, and then go through the next loop on the other side. And we just keep going. You can always turn it around and see if you like the look. And you can see it leaves the ridges here. So that creates an interesting pattern. Now we finish the sewing and weaving all the yarn ends. We can just turn it over. It kind of creates the pointy toes in the front. You can also tuck it in a little bit so it looks more natural. Now that's the project for today. Thank you for watching.